The kind of journalism I do best isn't where something has happened and then you go in afterward, you already know there's a story. And then you go in and do interviews and dig into archival material to tell that story. It's the journalism I do. I hope there's a story, but it begins not with a story at all, but with a question that I'm hoping my reporting will answer. In the case of my first book, The Good Soldiers, this was a book done about a battalion of Army infantry soldiers in 2007 when the Iraq War was presumed to have reached its lost moment. I've talked about this, but it's a tragic moment. That was the presumption. And into that moment, George W. Bush announces this thing called a surge. And into the surge went these 800 young men who thought that they were going over to Western Iraq to do convoy protection. And instead were reimagined into a battalion that was going right into the teeth of this thing. And they were thrilled, forgive me for generalizing, but almost to a man, they were thrilled to be going. That they weren't going to the perimeter of the war, they were going to the thing itself. And of course, they were 19, they were 20 years old, and they were young men with a young man's sense of invincibility. And that's how they left to go into this thing. And the book I wanted to write wasn't a book about the Iraq War. There have been plenty of those. I wasn't qualified or capable of doing that book. I wanted to do something more intimate, and the question I had in mind is not to write about the war, but to use the war to write about character. What becomes of a young man who goes into a war at such a moment? That was the question I had in mind. And so I went with them, and I stayed with them through their deployment and until I thought I had come up with an answer. The answer, of course, was the story that I came home and told. So that's my one move, to go, to be curious about something, to have a question in mind, to not have an answer in mind, but to put in the hard work to get to a reasonable answer. And this, I understand how corny that sounds, and I'm going to add to the corniness by telling you I'm guided by this many things, but one of the things I'm guided by is this Ernest Hemingway quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it badly, but it's something like, "The job of a writer is not to judge, it's to understand." Well, I take that seriously. If I want to judge, well, hell, I don't need to go in the first place. But I want to understand, and I believe in the power of good information for people. I don't want to insist a reader come to a particular conclusion, but I want to do a good job of conveying some corner of something going on with enough authenticity that the reader can then say, well, here's some valuable information, and then the reader can have it to sort of figure out what he or she thinks about the whole deal. Somebody may hear that and think, well, that seems kind of limiting, but to me, I think that's anything but.